So, any questions? No questions at all?
No
Are you
questions.
exhausted? Do you see any similarities in your the stories that you've been telling? Do you see links from Mexico to Sápmi?
A lot.
Yes?
I mean, yes, and the approach to also these political aspects. Because maybe I was thinking when you were showing that I didn't told also that a lot of the images I was showing you, maybe some other Mexicans will disagree with me because this has to do with the way where you live and where you grow up. And that was where I grew up. So I'm not coming from a rich family or something. I was in, and after when I leave home, I went in the hard places. So all this is related to somehow. But I think social context is very similar.
Also, I know that you have been working a lot with nomadic questions, and you were talking about the nomadic too. And it's kind of important, both the diaspora you were talking about of the Mexican people today, but I guess that all over America, before it became borders, like you said, it was easier for people to move. And the Sami people has to, they don't consider themselves like what, they're more like Sápmi, aren't they, more than they are, or are they very bound to a place? This is a question for both of you, actually. So.
Yeah, the nomadicness is one thing is to think about sort of the more literally concept of nomadicness, but another thing that I wanted to say also in relation to your last question, which I thought was really which really struck a string in me, which was when you talked about the hybridity of indigenous culture and Catholic Church, and this like some meeting point between culture, and that type of hybridity, that type of kind of reappropriation or meeting between the, let's say, Western culture and the indigenous culture is something that I've been very, very fascinated by, and the sort of aesthetic that comes out of that, and also the sort of the design and architectural objects that come out of that. That's a project that I've done, which actually is very specifically looking at that type of design. I call it the indigenuity project. Because you find a lot of these like homemade, super fascinating design items on the in the backyards of all these areas, and for me that is something that's very related to this capacity or this ability, this attitude to use what you have to solve a problem there and then, no matter what kind of materials you have accessibility. Is this kind of a do-it-yourself attitude? Is this kind of capacity to see resources in your close surroundings, and I think that again is something that we have from being a nomadic culture, something that comes from a life living on the land, because the architecture and the design that you make when you're living in that kind of way, it's like it's something that you are you're very you're very forced to to make the most out of little. When you're moving on the land, when you're being nomadic, and I think that those concepts are still alive in the Sami culture very, very much. That capacity, but now it takes on very different forms. It doesn't look like a lavvo anymore. It looks like a bottle of Coke used as a handle on a railway or something like this. So this type of creativity, this type of we have a Sami word called birgen, which means this ability to solve problems or to stay alive or to klare seg selv. A bit like that. And I think that type of design is something for me that's like it totally is nomadism in a way.
It's very interesting also. I think it has to do with a lot of cultures, but also I think that you're both talking about, which fascinates me, is that during my lifetime as an artist, from this art has to answer to itself and never, ever, ever mention words like magic or religion, or when you're talking about art. And today it's getting back into art. And I think that's very interesting, because when you see the the religious aspect and the mix, like you talk about Mexico, I think this things that like the Catholic with the idea of when you take the sacrament, it's true. I mean, you can't be a Catholic. I grew up as a Catholic. You can't be a Catholic without saying that when you get the bread, it's meat, and when you drink the wine, it's actually blood, which disgusted me as a child, but I really believed in it. And since they told you, I went to a Catholic school taught by nuns, and they would say, this is blood, this is meat. And as a child, you accepted that. And this, I think, both of you are sort of bringing back into art, which I think is very nice. And that's what I said, that when I came to Latin America, I just didn't understand, even though I had this Catholic upbringing, I didn't understand that this could surround you. So I didn't understand Latin American, or you can say North American literature, or I just didn't understand. I didn't have that within me. I read Russian literature, Norwegian literature, and they never do magical realism. I mean, you would never find. It would be very subtle, very, very discreet if it was in. So something changed within my head after seeing that everything is possible. And I just interviewed Synnøve Persen, and she just goes around her house saying, oh, here's a magical circle. Here it was sacrificing. And I was like, oh my God, this is in Norway. And we are actually, and this is why I find this so interesting.
I wanted to say that I was fascinated by the images, and that when you think about Norway, it's more this clean image that you think about in general, like as country, design, art, but this is very Norwegian also, and this is very part of it. And this, for me, relates to this kind of, I don't know if it's flexibility of kind of almost surviving instinct with this colonization that you talk about, of this impose of indoctrination of it, and how we have to improvise and move. And there is a very nice Aztec doubt that they say you can come and you can take my land, you can take my life, but you cannot take my freedom. No? And we try to, then we are nomads, we will move on, and my soul I will keep with me. So, and when you know, in these more physical or psychological aspects, if you have to move, you have to clean and take what you need only. Of you, as you do in your projects, you improvise where you are, and matter of materials, of ideas, of other projects. It's very related to what I do. Sometimes I come to places, especially when you are traveling a lot, and then you say, I don't have any material, but I have to do something. I don't have any possibilities. And this, I'm talking now related in art aspects, but in life also. When you move, you come to some place and you don't have anything. And you see, what do I have? And I have to survive. And all this is somehow reflecting all the time. So just to say, in matter of interior, as I told you, the Aztecs, they kind of appropriate these Christus images. But also in the churches, the interior, they were asked, because they were taken as slaves. They have to do everything. So they say, okay, now you have to decorate the church inside. And the Aztecs say, okay, if they are killing us and they don't want that we practice their religion, they cannot read the codex of the images as we do. So they started to paint all the church in order that the Indian people, the indigenous people was going there, and they were reading all the Aztec religion inside the Catholic Church. But the priests didn't know that they were, and they say, we succeeded because they are coming to the church, but they were not going for the for the Catholic rituals, but they were like any flower and paints that are in the churches. It was because of that. So it's this way of how do you adapt. And again, I come back to this, what I started, freedom, communication, when I told what do you understand of how I judge you, you judge me, and all those aspects, I guess.
So that should be the word of the day, is to communicate and share, shouldn't it? Thank you so much for coming. The next, do you have a question? Yep, great. Several questions. I have to hold this
Okay.
because of the corona.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, like, it's maybe more for Joa, but about like, but it maybe applies in a different way. It's about like, do you think that like modern Norwegian like capitalist like state or like with its ideas of property and territory and stuff can really learn from and adopt values from Sami architecture? Or do you think that it can be reformed, or do you think like what you're doing is more building like an alternative space, or like, you know, I'm wondering like, can these principles really be taken up by the people who build places like Bjørvika, or like is it a total clash of values, or you know, something like this?
Interesting question.
Yeah, I love the question. That's the question that I think about all the time. I got no idea. I just keep sort of diving into these topics and approaching them from different ways. Like this TV series that Lotte mentioned, I made this like as a part of the show in Bergen. I made a 3-series architectural TV program. It's called the Post-Capitalistic Architecture TV, and that is somehow it's an attempt to sort of remove myself a little bit away from the sort of this design and the space, and into sort of the more sort of discussion and topics in a more generic way. So I'm trying to not sort of frame it only through a Sami lens, but try to frame these discussions a little bit more sort of in a generic way and universalize them a bit. So most of the people that I'm sort of into isn't sort of a talk show. I'm driving around in my car and having interviews with people that I meet in the car. And most of the people that I talk to, the researchers coming at the same topic, but from very, very different fields and very different angles. So like a lawyer talking about flow parallel to an archaeologist, for example. And then also a car mechanic being invited in to talk also about the same topic. And then sort of cutting and pasting in this material. And then trying to make a universal narrative that everyone can approach. I don't know if that's educative, but I sure hope so. And I hope that they can be creating sort of that sort of a bit like an antithesis sort of headline to it, the post-capitalist architecture. I don't know what that is, but it's an interesting way of sort of framing it as a bit as something that at least tries to be something else. But if it can be sort of directly applied to Bjørvika, that's I love that. As you have a lot of
We would love
ideas.
that too.
Yeah, let's do
That
it.
lives here. So Apollonia has a question.
Yeah, no, I just have to say something. It was a pleasure to listen to both of you, and I agree with you, Lotte, of having this opportunity to sit here after so long. I think this might be maybe the first time for me after March to be sitting in a place with many people, and well, not that many, but still a maximum amount, I suppose, and discuss something. I appreciate this very much. Not discuss, listen to you, learn from you, and perhaps discuss even more. I have 1,000 questions in my mind right now, but I don't know what to ask, really. The one that stuck in my head was this idea of yours work being site-specific, which I think it's totally not, but it's actually much more of a relationship to the identity, to being a kind of a very obvious Sami ambassador. And in the same way, Jorge being a kind of ambassador which is not that obvious, and it became much more obvious to me today. And I wonder, when you talk about the nomadity or being nomadic, you're both nomadic artists, sort of saying, moving from one exhibition to another, and working and producing work for the exhibition. But as I experience we had some shows, let's say, shows, yeah, actually together. you always bring stuff with you. Well, not always. The last Timisoara was not, you ask material there and the craftsmen from Timisoara. But I'm trying to rethink the site specificity in that relationship to people you get on board with your project, but actually bringing your Sami embassy performativity with you. So I think that's a kind of very important part. In London, you brought with you all the skins and stuff, so it was quite a heavy bagage from Tromsø, I suppose, or from Sapmi.
They were felts from Mongolia.
Oh, they were from Mongolia. Yeah, exactly. That's right. So you are also carrying things with you, as opposed to maybe Jorge, who said, I have to find the material on site or have it in the pocket with me or something like that. I don't know. But there is something that that this artistic nomadity, redefining site specificity in another way. And I don't know how, and I'm just kind of trying to compose it in my head, but it is even not context-specific anymore, it's something else. And that has a lot to do with both of you's backgrounds, let's say, and the kind of personalities and identities you are.
Thank you.
Can I give a comment about
Yes.
this? Yesterday I had a Zoom meeting with the curator of the Math Museum in New York, and she was talking about the materials. And she, maybe I formulated wrong that I find the materials. I'm always looking for materials. But so she was asking me for my materials, and I said, well, no, this work I made in Belgium, but the materials I found in Chile. For example, the seaweeds. And it's just an action that I found the materials, and I get a certain connection, and I started just to try to work mentally on it, and I went to buy another luggage, and I bring it all the seaweeds to Belgium, which is very dangerous sometimes because I am always transporting the human bones I was bringing from Mexico to Belgium. So sometimes I am, and she said, you are making even nomads your materials, you know. So because it's not that I'm working directly there, so I need time to, and I need time to try out, and I need time to be familiar with them. So then it's a very strange thing. I have a huge storage of materials that still they're waiting to be worked on it. So, any material is coming from another country, and I always need the time to relate to something in my work. But it's always like a dialogue that is continuous. This react to the previous work or something like that.
One last comment from you, Oil, because I think people are starving. I am starving. I'm soon to be faint. I'm soon to faint.
No, but I could also respond to that, of course, that topic of nomadicness, like obviously like in the backbone of a lot of things that I'm looking at. But I think one thing that I want to say is like, I think for me it has always been like when architects work with the concept of nomadicness or nomadism, it's very often thought about this sort of placelessness as this thing that is a bit like sort of moving, you know, from one place to another without really sort of responding so much to where it is, as if it didn't have. It's very often used in a generic way, basically. So like something that doesn't, like an airport, like an iPad on an airport or something like that. And I think that for me, nomadism, the way I approach it and the way I've been talking about it is the opposite. It's like, for me, nomadism is the ultimate site specificness. It's really, that's what it is about. It's about this response to a place. And it's really about how I think about it. And when I work with nomadism, I use it in that way. And that it's like, it's all about actually, you know, yes, you are moving, but you're also extremely dependent on the situation that you land in. And that dependency is, for me, the really sort of core of indigenous philosophy, of Sami philosophy, of something that actually connects people to the land, and something that is about to be completely forgotten, or it has become forgotten by mankind. And see where we are. You know, we're trying to reclaim this, to re-find it. And for me, I find it in my culture. I find it there. And these sort of philosophies that's found in nomadism is is one of them.
And maybe some Norwegians has adapted that. I mean, not a lot, but maybe it can. Like that's sort of his question. Can it goes into barcode? Can it actually? Can we learn from the Sami now? The Sami people has a lot of attentions that they didn't have before, but the National Museum bought in a lot of Sami art, and we can hope that this, like you're talking about, this is very interesting. It has to do with economy and capitalism and everything to do. So we can hope that the Norwegian people can learn from it.
Yeah, and I think it's not that it only exists in Sami culture. It exists everywhere. In many other places. For me, it's just a point of sort of advantage, of course, to work with it from this perspective, because it's who I am.
And like the textile artist Elisabeth Hoare once said, the bunad is a response to traveling fabrics, isn't it? I mean, it's been going all over the world, so it's not like we've been here isolated by ourselves. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful, and I hope you guys have had a great day. The 20th of November, the next agenda is going to be about school and art school specifically. So we're going to present Arne Gutte's new movie. I'm going to do a small lecture on Mike Kelly's educational complex. And we'll have at least 1 or 2 more lectures. So please stay tuned at Agenda Kunst og Håndverk. Thank you.